The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming a frenzied rhythm on my car's windshield as I navigated the winding streets of Thornwood. The town had a reputation for being eerie, especially at night. But as a struggling college student, the allure of a higher tip on a late-night pizza delivery was hard to resist. Little did I know, this delivery would plunge me into a nightmarish encounter I would never forget. The address led me to a decrepit mansion at the end of a long, overgrown driveway. Its windows were dark and foreboding, and the front gate creaked open with an unsettling groan. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the promise of a hefty tip kept my feet moving forward. I grabbed the pizza box and approached the porch, my heart pounding like a bass drum. I hesitated before pressing the doorbell, my finger hovering over the button. The door swung open with a rusty creak, revealing a tall, gaunt figure cloaked in shadows. "Ah, the pizza is here," a voice whispered, sending a shiver down my spine. The man's face was pale, his eyes sunken and devoid of emotion. He extended a bony hand, revealing a pile of cash that seemed almost too good to be true. I stammered a thank you and handed him the pizza, my gaze unable to meet his. As he counted the money, a cold gust of wind blew through the open doorway, extinguishing the dim candlelight that flickered behind him. "Would you like to come in and warm up?" he asked, his lips curling into a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, but the allure of that tip held me in place. I reluctantly stepped over the threshold into a dimly lit foyer. The air was heavy with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. "Please have a seat." He gestured to a worn-out armchair beside an ancient fireplace. I hesitated for a moment before sinking into the seat, the worn fabric cold and damp against my skin. The man disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. My eyes darted around the room, catching glimpses of faded portraits and dusty, cobweb-laden furniture. A gnawing feeling of dread settled in the pit of my stomach as the minutes stretched on like hours. Suddenly, a faint whisper reached my ears, carried by the wind that howled outside. "Leave this place," it seemed to say, a desperate plea that sent a shiver down my spine. I looked towards the source of the voice, but the room remained empty. The man returned, his hands now gripping a tarnished silver tray. Upon it rested a single slice of pizza, its cheese congealed and its toppings glistening with an unnatural sheen. "Please enjoy," he said with a tone that sent ice down my spine. I forced a smile and took the slice, my stomach twisting with nausea as I realized I had been lured into a macabre feast. The man watched intently as I took a hesitant bite, the taste of the pizza metallic and bitter on my tongue. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and the room began to spin. The walls seemed to close in, and the man's figure distorted into a nightmarish blur. I struggled to stand, my legs wobbling beneath me as I fought against the growing darkness. "You should have heeded the warning," the voice whispered again, this time echoing inside my head. The room dissolved into an abyss, and I felt myself falling deeper and deeper into an abyss of shadows. When I awoke, I was back in my car, parked outside the mansion. The rain had stopped, and the first light of dawn was breaking through the horizon. My heart raced as I realized it had all been a terrible dream. I looked down at my hand, expecting to see a slice of that cursed pizza, but it was empty. Trembling, I started the car and drove away from the mansion, vowing to never return. But the memory of that night lingered, a chilling reminder that some desires come at a horrifying cost. And as I delivered pizzas in the daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister still lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim.
The city lights had long faded behind me as I navigated the dark, unfamiliar streets. The glow of my car's headlights sliced through the heavy mist that clung to the pavement, casting eerie shadows on the buildings that loomed like silent sentinels. It was a night like any other for a pizza delivery guy like me, or so I thought. The order had come in just as I was about to wrap up my shift. One large pepperoni pizza, extra cheese, delivered to an address that seemed more suited for an abandoned warehouse than a customer's home. But tips were scarce, and the promise of a generous one convinced me to accept the challenge. As I turned onto the desolate street, the weight of isolation settled upon me like a shroud. The houses grew sparse, and the silence was broken only by the rhythmic patter of rain on the roof of my car. My GPS directed me to a dilapidated building at the end of the road, its windows shattered and boarded up. I parked my car and glanced at the address once more. It matched the one on the order, but something felt off. a gnawing unease that crawled up my spine. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a faint, distant sound that made my heart race. I grabbed the pizza box, my breath forming mist in the chilly air, and approached the building. The entrance was a gaping maw of darkness, the light from my phone's flashlight doing little to penetrate the inky blackness beyond. I took a hesitant step forward, the creaking of the floorboards beneath me echoing through the silence. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. "Hello," I called out, my voice swallowed by the darkness. There was no response, only the echo of my own words bouncing back at me. Taking a deep breath, I ventured further inside, the beam of my flashlight revealing a cavernous space that seemed frozen in time. The air was heavy with the scent of dampness and decay, and the walls were adorned with peeling wallpaper that hung like the tattered remnants of a forgotten era. As I cautiously navigated the maze of hallways, the sound of dripping water became a haunting melody, each drop echoing like a distant whisper. I finally reached a room at the end of a long corridor, its door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, revealing a scene that froze the blood in my veins. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering candle, casting grotesque shadows on the walls adorned with peculiar symbols and drawings that seemed to writhe and dance. In the center of the room sat a table, and on it rested the pizza box. My heart raced as I approached, my mind racing with questions. What kind of person lived here? And why order a pizza to this forsaken place? As I lifted the lid of the pizza box, a putrid smell wafted out, assaulting my senses. I gagged and stumbled back, my flashlight beam revealing a sight that would forever haunt my nightmares. The pizza was topped not with cheese and pepperoni, but with grotesque, mangled body parts. Fingers, chunks of flesh, and even an eye staring up at me with a lifeless gaze. My scream tore through the room, bouncing off the walls and mingling with the eerie chorus of dripping water. Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee, only to freeze in my tracks. The doorway I had entered through was no longer there. The room had shifted, the walls closing in like the grasp of a malevolent entity. "Welcome," a voice whispered, its source impossible to locate. The air grew frigid, and the drawings on the walls seemed to writhe and contort as if they were alive. I pounded on the walls, my fists bruising and bloody, but they offered no escape. Hours, or maybe days, seemed to pass in that nightmarish room. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, and the dread that had settled in my chest festered like a festering wound. The symbols on the walls seemed to seep into my mind, their meaning eluding my grasp, yet filling me with a sense of impending doom. Just when I had resigned myself to the inevitable, the room began to shift once more. The doorway reappeared, and I stumbled out, my legs weak and trembling. The building had changed, its walls pulsated with an otherworldly energy, and the air buzzed with an unsettling electricity. I burst through the entrance and into the night, gasping for air as the rain soaked me to the bone. My car was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a sprawling forest that seemed to stretch on infinitely. I ran, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of fear and desperation. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I stumbled upon a road, my voice hoarse from screaming and my body battered and bruised. A passing motorist stopped and rushed me to safety, but when I turned to look back at the forest, it had vanished, as if it had never existed at all. The police investigated the building, but it was as if the nightmarish room had been swallowed by the earth itself. No trace of the symbols or the grotesque scene remained. They labeled me as a traumatized victim, chalking up my harrowing experience to a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. But I know the truth. I can still hear the drip of water, the whispered voices, and the haunting laughter that linger in the recesses of my mind. The night I delivered that pizza to the forsaken building was no ordinary night. It was a descent into a realm of terror that shattered my sense of reality and left me forever scarred.